Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Glad to have you here today. It is the NSGIC EDH for 3D NHD monthly forum. I am pleased to announce today we will be talking with USGS about their efforts to build the infrastructure for updating National Hydrography Datasets with EDH working with Alaska. Just a quick welcome. First of all, I just want you all to know that the webinar is being recorded. I would ask you if you could to enter your name and your organization into the chat. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, please enter those into the chat as well. As most of you are aware, the EDH for 3D NHD program is a NSGIC USGS cooperative agreement, and the intent is to engage state and local governments as well as private sector partners in the derivation of high-resolution hydrographic data from 3D LiDAR and, as we'll hear today, IFSAR in Alaska. Just a quick project update. You are participating. These are our primary tasks here, these bars on the right. You are participating in the monthly information webinars, the forums that we're having. And again, thank you. Please feel free to contact us if you have specific issues or are interested in presenting. There are two EDH communities at mynisgic.org, both an interest group, which is general information we share about the activities, project activities, as well as a working group for folks that would like to specifically engage in some of these tasks. And I am happy to say I believe we'll be engaging that working group next month. We've got a potential opportunity to, we'll get more details to that, but I think that group will be engaged next month. With regards to inventory state and regional EDH experiences, we still need your input. Please. I can't see my slide notes, so I can't put the chat in. Phil, if you're on the line, I don't see Phil on the line. All right, well, we'll get you that email, but you should have it. That information was sent out to the EDH inventory interest group, the EDH interest group. So you should have a link there. If you need it, just contact me and I'll find it and I will get it to you. Excuse me. And as we are also continue to work on a 3D NHD information hub that's in development. And I want to thank Phil. He's done a great job with that. We're not quite ready for prime time though. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. I'm going to introduce Becky, and then Becky, you can explain Steve's role and introduce Amanda if that's okay. Becky Anderson is not only our point of contact for the the EDH for 3D NHD cooperative agreement, but she is the management planning lead for National Hydrography Datasets and Infrastructure with the USGS National Geospatial Program, and we're very happy to have her with us today. Becky, I will stop sharing. Well, I'll leave it on while you introduce the other speakers. How's that?
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks so much, Linda. So Steve Achel was supposed to give this presentation today, but he couldn't make it. He's currently waiting to see if he's going to be on a jury. So I stepped in and I'm going to do my best with his slides today. And also we're going to hear, I'll do about half the presentation and then we'll hear from Amanda Lowe. Amanda works for the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. She's supervisory geographer there and works both on the hydrography side and the elevation side to oversee and coordinate the research, what we call applied research, which is kind of the how we do things with our national data sets. Amanda, do you want to add anything about your role or?
No, I think that's good. Thank you, Becky.
Great, sounds good. Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, good. It didn't put the square, the orange or the green square around it for some reason. So we've been talking about elevation derived hydrography. Previously, we called it ELI Hydro for about a decade. We've been talking about this for a long time. And in the last couple of years, we've really been busy at USGS building the background infrastructure, or what I call the process infrastructure, for enabling systematic standardized acquisitions of hydrography based on 3DHP data. And this is a task that's much more complicated than you may think, maybe than I ever envisioned. But really, the place that we're starting to get this infrastructure up and going is in Alaska. And I'll talk about why that is and why that benefits all of you who aren't from Alaska. So the big point here is that we need the National Hydrography Datasets. Why should we invest in hydrography data? Well, hydrography data are essential to a broad range of critical applications that you can see below. The current hydrography program, so the National Hydrography Datasets of the NHD watershed boundary dataset and the NHD plus high resolution, or I guess previously the NHD plus medium resolution, it provides about $538 million in annual benefits. And we know this because of the hydrography requirements and benefits study that was done in 2016. And that's probably a conservative estimate. But going forward, we believe that a modernized 3D enabled hydrography program could provide up to over $1 billion annually in benefits if we meet all of the user requirements that were found in the HRBS. Currently, hydrography data management takes a collaborative approach. So the portfolio of data sets I mentioned a moment ago, you can see on the right, is the most comprehensive and current data for the nation's surface waters. This is about 8.4 million miles of stream network, 7.8 million water bodies, and over 130,000 nested hydrologic units. This is a lot of data. And the NHD and WBD leverage local knowledge and updates using what we call stewardship. So there's 41 states and DC participate in these programs to help us keep the NHD and the WBD up to date, as well as some federal agencies in particular with the WBD. But we've got a problem. These updates are not uniform. Some of the areas are updated, others are not. We don't have all 50 states participating, for example, and some states are able to participate at a higher level than others for various reasons. Sometimes this data is even up to 40 years out of date. And I'll tell you, in Alaska, it's even more. It was previously even more out of date than that. This, over time, this has led to the national consistency decreasing. So we started out mapping the NHD from quite a bit from the topo quads. But as we've gone forward, some states have really densified their data. Some states haven't. Some have added a lot of attributes or updated them, others haven't. Also, we have issues with connectivity in the NHD, and this is within the stream network itself. And there are some lingering delineation blunders in the WBD. Also, these data don't align well with current elevation data. And you can see the image over on the right of this is what happens over time when you splice together a lot of different methods and means. You end up with a vehicle that kind of looks like this, and this is kind of how the NHDs look in these days. But hydrography derived from elevation offers a solution. So we can provide national consistency while meeting local needs. And so we have a goal now to standardize the NHD to align vertically, horizontally, and temporally with 3DHP data. This supports national and regional level issues, things like flooding and water quality studies, water quantity, drought, also supports climate change studies. We can do more accurate and updated modeling and analysis when we model the data from elevation. And in particular, we can do analysis against and with the elevation data. Updating the NHD also provides the basis for updating the WBD and the NHD plus high resolution. So as I noted before, the HRBS study was done in 2016, and one of the major findings in that study was the documentation of the need to integrate hydrography and elevation data. So we can do this process. We can go from the car truck stuck together and get to nationally consistent data by updating using elevation. But we can still work with stewards to continue to provide local knowledge on attributes and flag any issues in the geometry of this data with things like our markup tool that we've developed, and possibly other means as well. So there'll always be a very strong role for local and state level knowledge. We did some early work to derive hydrography from elevation, things like GeoNet, BotHat, ArcHydro, other various techniques, but none of these methods were really the magic bullet. Each of them got a lot of things right, but they also required a lot of manual editing and rework. So really, we've stepped away from this kind of approach of, thinking about how we could do it ourselves, that kind of thing. And we're thinking instead about defining a product and setting up specifications for that product. And we can leave the methods up to contractors and others as long as it meets the specifications. Back in 2016, we did a series of pilot projects. There were 5 hydrologic unit 10s, so HUC 10s, in 5 different environments, and with 2 contractors, I think. And we did these experiments to find out what were the likely costs for a nationwide program to derive hydrography from elevation? What are the technical issues that might need to be resolved? We had a long list of technical issues to look at, just a basic understanding of the NHD data model and how NHD works, with updating that with using elevation data. We also needed to know more about the language and the workflows for contracting. That might seem like it's kind of a side thing, but it actually can become very important. We realized that we needed to have quantifiable and testable standards and specifications. If we don't have those, then contractors and others don't understand what we want, and we don't have a way to test against that data that's coming to us. And so to be able to do those tests, we also knew that we needed to develop tools and workflows to inspect the data that we'd be getting in. So we continued to do some more pilots. In 2019 and in 2020, we had more pilot projects. These all worked through GIPC or geospatial product and service contracts, which is a contracting vehicle through National Geospatial Program here at USGS. And the goals of these pilots were to build inspection procedures and assess the specifications, and also to understand the costs and any issues with contracting. So this is kind of going to the next phase after the 2016 pilots, building on what we learned. We started out in 2019 with some pilots in Alaska, up in the Kobuk region, which is kind of Northwest Alaska. This is an area that is uncomplicated from the perspective of infrastructure, physical infrastructure. You're not going to find a lot of culverts there. You're not going to find a lot of roads there. So it was kind of simple in that way. Also, we had complete coverage of 3DHP 5-meter IFSAR as the elevation base. There were 3 contractor firms working across 4 different areas within the Kobuk itself. A majority of this data has been completed, and some of it is already available in the NHD, and we can maybe drop that in the chat or send that out to everybody if you're interested in looking at it. This is the first time that we've really had Z values added to the NHD. And so it's pretty exciting from that perspective. And I should mention, we're also updating the NHD and WBD in this area. We then take the data and are producing the NHD plus HR using the updated NHD and WBD in the 5-meter IFSAR. We also had another pilot in Southeast Texas that started in 2020, but it's ongoing. I think we just received the first round of data a couple days ago. This was updating, again, the NHD and WBD, but this was using 3DHP QL2 LiDAR 1-meter standard DEM, so USGS standard product. This is a part of a larger interagency project to create a seamless topography model. So this is the beginnings of what you may have heard called the 3D National Topography Model, or 3D NTM. This is kind of a first look at doing that. And this is really important for improving hydrologic and hydraulic networks to inform decision-making for things like flooding. And this area is highly prone to flooding. If you've ever seen, it's kind of just east of Houston, and I-10 runs through here, and you may have seen pictures from when hurricanes have gone through and the interstate is completely under the water. It's pretty amazing. So the seamless topography model above and below water will include topobathymetric work as well. This data, I think the WBD data will be coming in next. Something else that I didn't mention that we're getting with, I'm not sure if we got it with the first Alaska pilots, but I believe we're getting it with Alaska data now, and we asked for it in Southeast Texas as well, is hydro-enforced and hydro-conditioned digital elevation models. And those are, of course, really important when you want to look at doing any modeling going forward with the new synthetic stream work, the line work. So when we started thinking about how are we going to move forward building out our internal process infrastructure for updating the NHD with elevation data, we thought, where are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? While we're doing a great job with 3DEP, and all of you guys have been doing an amazing job helping to move forward with 3DEP and fill in data in the nation, we still don't have coverage everywhere, and that makes it difficult because we need to work by hydrologic unit when we do this work. But Alaska, however, has full coverage of IFSAR at this point. So it has complete coverage of 3DEP elevation data. Now it is 5-meter IFSAR data, so it's a little bit different of a product. But this makes it much easier to begin to test out how are we going to do these processes. Also, across the board, it has less urban or engineered hydrology, for example, fewer culverts. I will say that the hydrology itself on the North Slope is much more complicated than lots of other places. But aside from that, we don't at least have to deal with a lot of roads. Also, Alaska has a governance structure in place for Alaska mapping. The Alaska Mapping Executive Committee oversees mapping in Alaska. And so that's been helpful. Alaska also, and maybe most importantly, currently has a funding mechanism through the Alaska mapping. Funding comes through appropriations right now, as it did for IFSAR, and that's been continuing. We don't know if it will continue, but for now, at least it has been up to this point. So just a little look at the 3DEP 5-meter QL5, I think I've got that right, IFSAR, it might be QL3, sorry about that. So you can see a real difference when we go from the image on the left, which was the previous elevation data, to the image on the right. And this is actually looking at a glacier. But you can imagine even in a stream, the amount of difference you see in detail with the 5-meter data. And previous studies have showed that it does model hydrography quite well. But this is a much simpler process and a much simpler data set to work on than a 1-meter product, for example. So just to give you a view overall of what we're doing in Alaska, this is kind of the overall flow of all of the steps. It's at a very high level, but we are taking the data all the way from contracts for the NHD and WBD through to production. So you kind of imagine 3DEP starts before this with the IFSAR data. So we've got production of updating that, basically creating the line work, bringing that into the NHD, updating the WBD, bringing that into the WBD national. And then from there, it moves on to the NHD plus HR build process. But today we're mostly talking about this area up here, the purple, blue, and kind of brown colors. So what have we been working to update with these internal processes? Well, we've been working on specifications. These were really needed and they took quite a bit of time to develop. We are interested in getting any feedback from you on the specifications. We will be updating them as needed. I'm not sure when we'll do an update, but I think all specifications evolve over time. Also, we've been working on contracting language, standardizing that. Also, inspection processes and the tools needed for those. We've needed to do a lot of practice and have a lot of examples so we can work through these issues. And then we need to work on our funding mechanisms. None of this is going to happen if we don't have funding for it. And I'll talk a little bit about the contracting language, and then I'll hand it over to Amanda to talk about many of the other things noted here. And I just wanted to add a note for all of you who aren't Alaskans. I'm actually an Alaskan myself, and I've worked on hydrography up here for a long time. But I can tell you, I work nationally now, and the infrastructure, this process infrastructure that we're establishing for these Alaska projects is paving the way for the CONUS work. And I should say also the islands work to come in the future. So we are setting up internal programs that help us track the projects as they come into our systems and our contracts, all the way into, we use JIRA is what we use to track projects often within our National Geospatial Technical Operations Center, so that we can create tickets and we can make sure that everything is as efficiently run as possible all the way through the inspections, conflation, and ingestion of the data. So at this point, the task orders for contracts are getting pretty good. Steve has done a lot of these for Alaska. I think he's working on the 2021 contracts right now, but these have been going well and they're getting pretty standardized. I worked on the one for Southeast Texas, and I think we've got some others maybe that'll move forward at some point, but even that language with the 1 meter is becoming very standardized. So if you at a state are thinking about contracting some of this work, you can track Steve or myself down and we can talk with you about what we've been doing as far as statements of work go and that sort of thing. Also, GIPC that I mentioned earlier is available. States, local governments, etc., can use that contract vehicle. And I can put more information maybe in the chat in just a bit, a link to the GIPC webpage. For task orders, there's a surprising amount of supporting documentation that's needed. We need to have data templates and a schema that are given to the contractor to give us back the data in a format that we'd like it in. We've also been doing a lot of work lately setting up processes for contractor questions and response. So just making sure that when contractors have questions, need more direction, that sort of thing, that we have a process and a way to work through those where we can track the documentation. In Alaska, we've been working on drainage density targets. You'd think it wouldn't be that difficult, but different areas even of Alaska, because it's so large, from rainy southeast to the much drier, much less treed north slope, the data really has different densities that are needed in the stream network. And so we've been working on methodologies to do, to kind of figure out what the target should be for density. We've been doing updates to thinking about interpretations of the specifications as we've been going through these pilots and these projects. Scheduling for Alaska has been a real challenge. We have not done an NHD update of this scale in a really long time. And you can imagine how many hydrologic units there are in Alaska. We also have the Canadian border, so data, a lot of water coming in from Canada that we need to figure out how to connect to and how to work through. Also, as I kind of mentioned before, with contractor questions and responses, we've been working on communications and records and ways that we can document that. And I'm going to hand it over to Amanda now.
All right, thank you, Becky. So Becky already touched on a number of the things that I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on. So I'm going to spend some time talking about specifications we are using for these projects. I'll talk about data management, a little bit about our inspection process, and then some more details about how we're communicating with our contractors. So the 2019 task orders for the pilot EDH projects in Alaska were developed prior to the publication of any USGS specifications. So as a result, these task orders referenced alternative documents containing requirements for the collection of hydrographic features derived from IFSAR elevation data. So these two documents were the Alaska Hydro Data Editing Standards, and then also a draft version of the Alaska NHD specifications. So that draft included many of the requirements from the upcoming EDH specifications to be published. So then, next slide, please. I clicked and I forgot that I don't have the ability to do that. All right, thanks, Becky. Okay, so in July 2020, we published two specifications documents, the USGS techniques and methods, elevation-derived hydrography and acquisition specifications, and then also the elevation-derived hydrography representation, extraction, attribution, and delineation rules. And so these will be used to update and enhance the NHD. The USGS has published these two documents, and they provide requirements and guidelines for developing elevation-derived hydrography. So since then, all EDH task orders developed in 2020 and later reference these two publications. So this is true for Alaska as well as CONUS. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in addition to these specifications, as we work through delivery, inspection, and feedback to the contractors for the 2019 pilot projects, and also more recent data sets, we've responded to inquiries regarding specification and interpretation in the form of guidance papers. So these are intended as aids to clarify existing requirements in the EDH specifications and read rules. So far we have two categories of guidance papers we have issued. And these include those that describe our inspection process and also those that clarify data collection scenarios. These documents have been issued directly to contractors with existing task orders on EDH, and we're also in the process of preparing these for access through our standards website so they can be accessed by the public. Okay, next slide. So our current workflow for receiving and validating data from contractors working on EDH task orders is as follows. First, we are notified through our commercial partnerships team technical point of contact that data are ready to be downloaded. The commercial partnerships team, as Becky mentioned, is the group that's responsible for managing all task orders under the Geospatial Products and Services contract, or GIPSI. So then next, we distribute the data to our research and data validation teams on our internal network. And these teams work together to inspect the data and compile feedback for contractors using an inspection process developed to ensure adherence to the specifications. Okay, next slide. EDH data are delivered to the USGS in Alaska by HUC-8s, and part of the inspection process is performed on those HUC-8 deliveries, and then also they're delivered into HUC-10 groupings for further review. And I'll talk a little bit more about that process in a minute here. Okay, next slide. So Alaska EDH deliveries consist of three components. Part A is delivery of the elevation-derived hydrography in the schema defined in the specification for EDH data. So the validation of this data set is performed by a dedicated EDH team. And this is a team that's been newly formed at the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. and we're still building onto it. We're still hiring and training new members of that team as we experience more work in this area. Part B is conflation to the NHD, and it's managed by our geoconflation specialists in our partner support section. And then finally, Part C is making updates to the watershed boundary data set. And validation of this data set is performed by the WPD team. The remainder of this presentation focuses on Part A of the inspection process. Okay, next slide. So the initial deliveries of Alaska EDH data from the 2019 pilot projects were used to further develop and refine inspection methods intended for contract deliverables. And this image depicts the NHD in a small area of the Kobuk River region prior to the EDH updates. And on the next image, so this depicts the EDH data delivered to us for the same area. And as expected, the density of features has increased significantly. Our initial inspections of data delivered for the pilot areas aim to perform a manual visual review of 100% of the delivered features, but we quickly realized this was not feasible given the resources available and contractual deadlines for inspection. So we turned our focus to ensuring our automated tools were giving us the most accurate results possible and to developing sampling methods for manual review as an alternative. Okay, next slide. So much of this inspection process has been developed by our senior research leads, Christian Archuleta and Sylvia Terziati. And so a lot of what we do for the data validation process is included in a pre-screening set of tools and methods that's performed at the HUC 8 level. And these are performed using a suite of automated tools and processes. So these include looking at drainage density by HUC 12, and we're comparing those results to the guidance that's issued with the task order for density targets. We're looking at whether or not artificial paths are outside or streams are inside polygons. We're also checking monotonicity, vertex spacing, making sure that no vertices are closer than 1.5 meters from one another. Vertical placement, both above and below ground. So making sure there are no vertex Z values above the DTM surface and that no Z values are more than 2 meters below the DTM surface. We're also looking at horizontal placement, XYZ coordinates of intersections and water body vertices relative to the hydroflattened surface. We're also checking topology and the geometric network. So the results of this pre-screening process are used to determine whether the data set should proceed to manual inspection. That's okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So once they are approved for manual inspection, the HUC 8 deliverable is subdivided into groups of HUC 10 areas. So these groups are assigned to inspectors for review. And within each area, some features will have a 100% inspection and some will have a sample inspected. So the types of features that we're doing a 100% inspection on are subsurface connection features, so underground conduits, connectors, and culverts. We're also doing 100% inspection on glaciers and features with new capture conditions, so areas of complex channels and coastlines. And then the remaining features, streams, drainageways, artificial paths, lake ponds, reservoirs, and double line streams, we're doing a stratified random sample of those features. And then we're doing a manual visual review on those. Okay, next slide. So during the manual inspection, reviewers are looking for potential errors in 3 categories. So this image just provides an example of a horizontal placement error, or three different horizontal placement errors. We're also looking at vertical placement. We're also looking for completeness, so errors of omission or commission, and we're looking at data integrity, so looking at schema and codes used, and also hydrography types. Okay, next slide. So once the full inspection is complete, errors are compiled from the pre-screening and manual inspection processes. And manual inspection errors are flagged spatially and categorized by error type. And then we compile a summary report. We write that up and include all of the results. And if the number of errors exceeds the threshold set for any given category, then we request corrections from the contractor. So this is just a snapshot of what the pre-screening report looks like, what types of information we're looking at. Okay, and sorry, I'm just lost my place here for a second.
All right, thanks, Amanda. I'll close it out with this last slide. So what's next? Where are we going next with this? Well, right now, what we're in the middle of working on in the, excuse me, National Hydrography world here at USGS is the 3D NTM Call for Action Part 1 3D Hydrography Program. And this is currently in draft. We have a plan to publish it by the end of 2021, meaning December, not the fiscal year. We've been working with a contractor on it to help us, in particular, focus in on the HRBS study and use that as the basis for where we're going into the future for kind of our start point. And after we go through this draft internally, we'll be working with some groups on an external review. And so we may be working with possibly some one of the groups within this project itself to help give some reviews to that. Within this call for action, we start out talking about the big picture of the 3D national topography model that will integrate the USGS elevation hydrography data to model the nation's topography in 3D. And that's kind of the big picture vision going forward. And that vision includes the next generation of 3DEP, as well as establishing what we're calling the 3D hydrography program. So we are finally making the shift, given that this all goes forward the way we think it will in the document right now. We're making the shift from a portfolio or a set of data sets to a program. And as I said before, this program is definitely rooted in HRBS and the findings from HRBS, as well as building on 2 decades of national hydrography mapping, experience, and contributions. So we're taking what we've learned, we're taking what we've done, we're moving forward with it, but we're planning to vastly improve what we're doing going forward and taking what we can from what we've already done that still fits. So in a nutshell, 3 big ideas from the 3DHP are to operationalize deriving hydrography from LIDAR and IFSAR, to, as we've been talking about today, to better account or to enable better accounting of the hydrologic cycle by adding connections to groundwater, better accounting for engineered hydrologic systems, as well as aligning better with the national wetlands inventory. And also fully implementing the national hydrography infrastructure, or what we may call just the 3DHP infrastructure, as a mechanism for sharing and discovering water information against the context of the 3DHP data. And the big missing piece for this still, of course, is funding. Once we put out the call for action, if we were to get funding to go along with that, our plans are to stand up a BAA program along with the 3DEP BAA program as a part of it, where we could partner to collect hydrography data updated using elevation data through a BAA type or BAA program. But of course, that's dependent on getting funding. In the meantime, we are more than happy to and excited to talk with states and others about updating hydrography from elevation data, to coordinate, to support however and wherever we can in the meantime, until we're hopefully someday all looking at some funds But please do reach out to myself, reach out to Steve Achel. You can reach out also eventually, hopefully, to Sue Budo. Hopefully she will be moving over to our program at some point and have a big role in the acquisition piece of this once her acting position is backfilled. So it's my last slide. So if you have any questions that are specific, feel free to email any of us directly. And I'll just open it up to questions, and I'm going to stop sharing so that Linda, you can share again if you'd like.
Okay, working on sharing. Hopefully you're still. Yes, so let's enter our questions in the chat. Phil, are you available to moderate?
Yep, I am. And several of them have already been answered in the chat, but let's go ahead and do them verbally so everyone hears them. First one I see is, how is stream periodicity determined?
So I see Amanda did a great job of already answering this, saying periodicity is not determined from elevation and is maintained for existing features through the conflation process. Going forward though, thanks Jane for the question. Going forward, we are looking into and doing research into how we might do periodicity in the future. And we haven't made total decisions about it yet, but I think given our experience with the Clean Water Act and some of the ways we want to be able to support Clean Water Act type mapping going forward, which of course may, the way the rules work related to stream flow permanence or periodicity with the Clean Water Act might be different than the way your state wants to categorize streams into perennial, intermittent, or ephemeral. So one thing that we're considering, and this would be great to get feedback on at some point from everybody, is if we could work with the water mission area at USGS to instead model what we think the flow is, so what we think the periodicity or stream flow might be for given stream segments as more of a numeric value over a period of time, and then let users, i.e. states, agencies, whomever, classify that into whatever stream flow categories you'd like to classify it into. So taking maybe a bit more of a scientific approach that would better inform the user, but still allow the user more discretion at making decisions about what amount of stream flow and on, at what amounts of, on what time frames work for you for different categories, since there are not well-defined categories for those different stream flow categories of, different periodicities.
Okay, thank you. And that Clean Water Act, that's kind of a whole can of worms, right? With respect to states defining the new hydro features correctly so that they avoid or correctly apply the new Clean Water Act rules, correct?
Yeah, and the Clean Water Act, I'm not even sure right now. We'd have to ask the EPA of where it is now and where it's headed. There was a rule change recently. I'm not sure of where that rule sits. I believe some states, are even not adopting the rule. I think Colorado might be a state that is not using the new rule, for example. I don't know what the current administration is going to do going forward. But one thing we learned in thinking through Clean Water Act mapping is that the better we can map smaller streams or stream channels, and the better we can provide scientifically based information related to the amount of flow in those channels, the better we can support any current or future rules that might be written about the Clean Water Act. So our kind of bigger goal is how do we do the best mapping everywhere in a scientifically defensible way, so that others can use it for whatever their needs are. And I feel like if we meet that goal, we'll be meeting goals for a lot of other applications as well.
Great, thank you. Question from Sam Moffett. Does the 3D NTD utilize 6-acre catchments within the Huck 12?
Sam, are you asking about just what the minimum watershed unit would be? Or I think I don't fully understand your question.
Yeah, I guess for when you extract I guess from LiDAR, honestly, when you extract the hydrology from the LiDAR, are you utilizing a 6-acre catchment or a larger one? Because obviously that would, more data, the smaller the catchment.
Right, yeah, I'm with you. Okay, so I was interpreting it the way you were asking it. We do not define within the specifications a certain minimum to be used. Really what we're looking to do is capture anywhere that water is flowing, right? So I think we still will maybe have a bit of variability. At some point we might come out with a minimum, but I would be surprised if we did as small as 6 acres, because that is pretty detailed. And especially in certain parts of the country, I think that would be way too much. So I guess the short of it is nothing's been defined at this point. That's hard and fast, but I don't think that it would be as small as 6 acres if it were. But I'm also very interested in you guys' feedback and input as to if you think there is something, there is a minimum size and what that would be.
Next question, has any Part B and Part C work been done in Texas yet?
Amanda, can you answer that one maybe?
Yeah, sure. So far for Southeast Texas, we received a sample data set and we reviewed that and provided some feedback. And we just received the full EDH delivery for that on last Friday. And so none of the Part B or C work has started yet, or we haven't received any at least.
Would it be correct to assume that you have to pass Part A before you go to B?
Yes, that's definitely true. So
okay.
For Part B, for conflation to happen, we have to accept the EDH data. And then one of the things that we're looking at for new task orders is trying to mitigate some of the changes that might need to happen, because when the WBD is updated, if a feature needs to move in the EDH data, if it's already been conflated, that causes a problem. So we're trying to work out that order of operations there and do the WBD inspection before conflation, or get that accepted before conflation. That's one of the things we learned.
Great, thank you. Next question, is the current NHD data model applicable for 3D data and analysis, or I'm sorry, adaptable for 3D data model and analysis? And are these modifications to the data model envisioned?
That's a really great question, Eric. It is adaptable from the perspective of we can attach the Z values to vertices with the current data model. So from that perspective, yes, but I do believe going forward, we really need to take a new look at the data model and think about how we want to, as we move from kind of cartography to, which is what the product kind of started with, to adding GIS analysis to it, to adding more of a modeling approach and trying to meet all of those needs. I think we need to look again at how we map water and make sure we're doing it in a way that does meet those needs, that continues to support these data sets being national geospatial data assets for geospatial data, that you could still use it in a GIS analysis or on a map, but also that it models hydrology in a way that supports modeling going forward. And I think in doing that, we need to look at perhaps a lighter data model and a more modernized data model. But if and when we do that, we'll be definitely reaching out to stakeholders to get input on where we're going with it. So again, please let me know if you've got thoughts. You can email me directly with your thoughts. I'd love that. If there's been something that you've always think's been missing or has been bugging you, or you've got a great idea of maybe, for example, we've been looking at and working a bit with Canada. They're working also on a new data model. And so we've been talking pretty closely with them. Since the NHD came out, High Features, which is more of a descriptive model for modeling hydrology, not the actual schema or data model, that has been adopted by OGC, and work was done on that, led by Dave Blodgett right here at USGS. So we've got a lot of new things to look at. I think Australia's done some cool things too. So do let me know if you've got ideas or things that you think would really improve the way you work with the data model.
Great. Next question. Will USGS create a repository to store and share approved Part A EDH data?
So, Phil, did you put that one in?
I did. How did you?
Are you asking specifically about the data before it's conflated?
Yes, when it's approved, when it's done, but it isn't conflated yet.
Right now, that is not in, for example, the plan going forward. What I would rather do is look at making sure that we have a data model and data structures that could basically expose all of that data, but through the 3DHP data itself. So rather than having kind of a raw data set that we are putting out and then pretty much a duplication of it, just alter things enough so that we can support getting, for example, how could we, one of the pieces that's kind of missing right now is maybe culverts. How could we instead expose the culverts through the 3DHP data? Because it really, every time we take on the load to distribute one more thing, it is a massive amount more work than maybe you could imagine to do that kind of thing. So the more we put it all in one place and keep it in one place, the more we all keep it up to date as well. So not at this time, Phil, but I think if we can get that data instead put into one place where we're distributing it, that would be a great way forward.
Good answer. Great. Next, can current task order sample language be shared with states?
I actually don't know the rules about that, but if you are interested in that, go ahead and contact myself or Steve and we'll get you an answer on that. Steve could probably answer it right off the bat, or I don't know if Sue Budo's on the call, she might be able to as well, but I don't want to promise that, but yeah, go ahead and contact us if you're interested, or unless somebody else from USGS knows an answer.
And Becky, I'm taking these down for the QA document, and we
Okay,
can
I'm
always
not seeing
add that
any other-
information to the document itself.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any other questions in the chat right now if I didn't miss any. So if anyone else has a question, just maybe take yourself off of mute and ask. Oh, any urban/rural distinctions in Texas?
Eric, can you ask that? Maybe give a little bit more information.
Yeah, what do you, in Pennsylvania, we're thinking about separating, the processes will be somewhat different in the urban and the rural environments, and just trying to even decide where to break them off. You guys are learning down in Texas in really flat environments. What are you seeing if you're starting to get some results?
Right. Well, I'll maybe toss this to Amanda in just a second. But first, I'll say it's been more of, you could say, an urban area that we've been, at least for the sample data that I think we looked at. But also, it is a highly engineered, as you said, it's flat, coastal, highly engineered area, and we are seeing places where you've got basically you could think of it as a ditch or a stream, and then we've got water running over that in channel, and then we've got a road. You know, we're seeing like 3 things on top of each other. It really gets at why we need 3D mapping. But it's been incredibly complicated in that area. So Amanda, anything you'd like to add to what you guys have been seeing in Southeast Texas?
No, I would say that's the biggest difference for that data set is just all the canals and ditches, and determining flow direction in those is challenging, obviously. And then, you know, one of the guidance documents that we had worked on to kind of dig into that a little bit more deeply, that it was directly related to that.
So it's an interesting idea to think about kind of mapping them separately, or maybe using slightly different methodologies. And I think we just haven't been in an area to have to try that yet, but I'll be interested to see if you guys do work in Pennsylvania, how you handle that. That would be good learning, and maybe you could present back to the group and we can see what we can all learn from it. There's one more question, I guess, from Phil. Phil, I'll read it since it's your question.
Next question.
Are you including storm sewer networks in the Southeast Texas pilot? No, we did not. Not specifically or explicitly. And this is something that we're looking at with 3DHP moving forward. How are we going to deal with storm sewer networks? I don't think that we can map every storm sewer network everywhere. This is probably just not going to be possible, right? So we instead have to figure out how much is enough. You know, you think about an application like the National Water Model, where you're really trying to map flooding across the country to warn people. This is really important work, right? My grandma needs to know when she needs to get out of her house because there's a flood coming. So how much mapping of a storm water system is enough? In a smaller municipality, can we get away with just drawing some basically rough lines through? In a larger city, do we need to capture all of the inlets, all of the outlets, how much connection, how do we draw those connections to be able to do something like flood forecasting? That's what we're going to be looking at with the research with that. So we still don't know, and we don't know if we'll do it through contracts or if we'll do it through some other coordination with municipalities, but we do have research into that planned in the future.
Okay, we are at 3:59. So
Great.
again, thank you so much. We appreciate it, Becky and Amanda. And as you folks know, this was recorded, so we will be posting to the NSGIC Learning link, the recording, as well as the chat and the Q&A. Excited to say that our next webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, June 16th, and Jim Gigliano will be talking to us about culvert mapping and hydro enforcement in the Lake Superior region. So for all those culvert questions, please be sure to tune in next month. So if you have any questions or any comments, you can contact myself or Phil. Becky has generously offered her team as well. So that contact information is in the slides, as well as you can reach out to Phil or I if you would like to, if you need contact information for the USGS team. So with that said, I thank you. I appreciate your time, and please stay in touch.